Welcome back to Real Talk NFT, where we talk about all things Web3 and crypto related. I'm your host, Brian. You know my amazing co-host, Joe. And we have a really special couple of guests here for you today. Chris, the chief of staff, and Jeremy, who's the head of engineering at Autonomys. They're a network that scales decentralized AI applications essentially on chain. They're probably doing a lot of big things. Buzzword out there is AI agents. So really happy to have you both on and chat it up.
Thanks so much.
Great to be here. Yeah.
Awesome. So to get started, why don't you give us just a little bit of a background about Autonomys and what the idea is and how you came up with it and really what the future of plan and vision is?
Sure. I'll start. I mean, the Autonomous Network we're kind of marketing it as this being this foundation layer of AI 3.0. So like, what is AI 3.0? Like AI 1.0, we might consider that machine learning up until the advent of generative AI. Okay, AI 2.0 is more of a centralized approach to Gen AI. And AI 3.0 is the commingling and convergence of AI and Web3. So we want to be this we are a hyperscalable, decentralized AI infrastructure stack, verticalized stack that encompasses high throughput, permanent, distributed storage, data availability, and access, as well as modular execution that we achieve through decoupled execution. So we believe that this decentralized AI ecosystem that we're providing is going to have all of the essential components to build and deploy what we're calling super dApps, AI-powered decentralized applications and on-chain agents. Agents are blowing up this year. Everybody's talking about them. We want to be able to equip agents with advanced AI capabilities for dynamic and autonomous functionality on-chain. So, yeah.
Great summary, Chris.
Thanks.
Great summary. No, it's you're right. AI agents, AI is such a buzzword right now. I swear, it was just a few months ago. I never heard the term AI agent in my life. Now I see it in gaming and work in everyday life. And when we were actually doing some research about the project, your Autonomys earlier, I messaged to Joe. I was like, "Hey, man, like, do you realize like AI agents are pretty much gonna be like doing like all our work in 5 years and it's going to be just a completely different world." And I was like, this is going to be a fun podcast. Really would love to know more about AI agents and how that intertwines with what you're building and how that will, develop in our real life eventually.
Yeah. So, I mean, Jeremy and I were fortunate enough to go to Permissionless last week in Salt Lake City, which is exciting. I mean, the space is evolving, and there was a separate branch on Thursday that dealt just with the convergence of AI and Web3, particularly with how are we going to be able to use AI to make every aspect of Web3 more accessible, easier to read, easier to use. That's the name of the game. So we saw a lot of projects at the DAI Day, like Theoric is a good example of something that could be built on the network. And so just to mention Theoric as a project, they're building this modular AI agent framework. Think of it like Perplexity plus like ChatGPT, but for agents, and having like a sort of agent database that you'd be able to make your own agents, build your own agents, deploy them, use smart contracts, all that jazz. But it's not just about like individual agents. Like now in the agent space has evolved over the last few decades, but agentics as a discipline has existed for decades. So decades ago, there was this idea of MAS, or multi-agentic systems. And we're seeing this more now with LLMs, where things like Hugging Face GPT have been created, where you have a central god or the primary GPT, and then you have subcomponents of that one is good for coding, one is good for language, one is good for on-chain transactions, stuff like that. So what we're seeing is this evolution of the space. We know that it's going to keep evolving in complexity, and as that continues, what do those agents need? They need to be trained on good data. They need to have access to a network with distributed compute and high throughput. So we're really excited about like how is this going to democratize AI. There's other projects that are building universal transaction layers for AI that have no gas. One project to mention is actually called No Gas. I think it's nogas.com. I'm plugging it. I just think it's interesting. But we're really looking at a future where people are going to be able to buy and sell agent models, and maybe even like rent them. I mean, like there was a whole idea of rentable NFTs, where I'm sure you guys were following that in the 2022 space. But yeah, as they become more sophisticated, there's other aspects of that maybe Jeremy can touch on, involving authentication and user authorization for agents. So that involves like if you have a model that's proto AGI or AGI level, and you just let it loose on chain, this was like a conversation that was happening at the conference. You just let this thing go loose. Like, who's responsible for this? This gets into the whole idea of like C2PA and content provenance, and this whole idea of who owns the data, right? Like back in 2013, Jaron Lanier, who is the godfather of VR, wrote this book called "Who Owns the Future." It's a really interesting book, but he kind of like had this idea that like we needed this like sort of individual liberty and freedom, and have a way to have the internet like really give back, because people were giving data to Web2 companies, but they weren't getting anything. Like, as they say, if you're not paying for something, you're the product, right? That's like the classic thing that everybody says. So um, there's other projects to mention, but what we're really seeing right now in the DAI space is a whole slew of different products and services like graph neural networks that are being used to have better ways to kind of figure out what is the next behavior that's going to be happening. Because like we know the future of money is going to be on chain. Being able to have good predictive analytics around those behaviors is major. So there's so many places and nooks and crannies to talk about this stuff, and it's really an interesting space. We know that this is just the beginning. There's not that many companies that are paying attention to this right now. There's a few smart companies, and there's other projects that were initially like near as an example is a company that started out with someone who founded it, that co-founded the transformer architecture, who had that idea in mind, and we're seeing the convergence of these technologies happen. So that's my initial take.
Well, I was going to ask, what's some unique use cases? The ones that we're seeing right now is, I'm sure you guys heard, there's a AI agent that's about to be a millionaire, if not already, and a lot centered around finance, right? Because it can find discrepancies and help you be better efficient. But where else can we see improvements with AI agents specifically? I know education is a big one also.
I guess I can take that, and Jeremy, I want to have you jump in because I don't want to fill all of the time. I think starting out, it's going to be the same sort of situation we saw with crypto, where people have like MEV bots and arbitrage bots that are running on networks and relatively simple in complexity. But as we know with neural networks, it's a bunch of crazy data in black box, and then a bunch of stuff that poops out, and sometimes it's kind of unclear how to attribute that. And there's projects that are working on uncovering like what is happening within a neural network. I mean, we've created neural networks to mirror the human brain with neurons, but as a similar parallel, we don't understand how human brains work either. So we've created something we really don't understand when you have this combinatorial nature of transformer architecture that is like compounded on itself. What are we going to see for the future? Literally everything. I mean, I think as context windows expand, as models become more performant and lower in size, we're going to see on-chain. We're going to see a lot more performance on-chain for different services and functionality. I think some of the easiest things are better arbitrage bots, better bots that are more easily and accessible and usable, have a better interface ideally. And then just with smartphones, it's like language models keep getting smaller and smaller, right? Like, I mean, Llama 3B came out, and then Llama 3.2 1B came out. And that's a major jump in improvement for performance, while being able to be run locally on someone's machine. So, I mean, the whole idea is like Apple is going to have like enclaves and stuff like that you'll be able to execute these things in trusted execution environments and know that the information is secure and private. As it expands, I think that the information age this rise with AI will become so exponential that the only way to follow things online is going to be using bots. Like, last example that I'll give before I turn to Jeremy is using Perplexity, right? Like, I use Perplexity every day for citing my sources online and understanding what's happening, and who said what, and like actually attributing that information to what's happening. That's an example of a bot that could exist, that could be used on chain for being like, oh, I have these analytics, but where do they come from? What wallets are they attributed to, et cetera? Jeremy, I'm curious what you think.
You just dumped a lot of information right there, Chris. So I guess I'll focus on what we're building around this. So as kind of this foundation layer, we're supporting all kinds of use cases, of whether it's agents or models. Two things that the agents and AI models, and generally software needs, are data and compute. We have data in abundance, as was mentioned. It's kind of a byproduct of our consensus. So what's that mean? We can put a lot of data on our chain without it being a burden. to the chain, which is quite different in the Web3 blockchain space. And that data can be used in lots of ways, for training, for that you can monetize your own data. You can make it verifiable as you, and like put it out there to be used, whether it's your Twitter data, or I've been playing around with something where potentially trying to monetize Strava data. So you know that data focus, I think, is going to be important, and being able to kind of own that data as your own is what Web3 offers. Identity, Chris touched on this a little bit, as we have these agents out in the loose. There was this speculation of what do you do when you like essentially burn the keys to the agent. You got a smart contract that's kind of controlling the flow of it, and now it's out on its own. Well, hopefully it's got an identity that can be, what it's doing can be attributed to it. More likely, you're not going to necessarily burn the keys on these things. You'll have some human controllers, and you'll need an identity system that is kind of pervasive so the agent can identify itself. It can say to who, from where did I come? It's Jeremy's agent, and that's provable. Let me prove that cryptographically. Go check the chain as a source of truth, and then what can I do? So authorization. So that is coming down from the probably human controller at the top of the chain. So these are some of the kind of specific things that we're working on and looking at Autonomys.
When we were talking about just AI, all I could think about earlier was AI requires a lot of data, and data requires a lot of storage. And I'm just like, how massive is this? And you just said a lot of data that you have is going to be built on chain, and you've obviously addressed that issue, and that's moving forward there. The interoperability, how's that work with your network in just like other chains and other builders? Just kind of walk me through that a little bit.
Yeah, so we'll be interoperable in the way that all chains are interoperable via bridges and such. We'll have those as we launch, hopefully going up fast. Will be usable cryptographically for like other chains to put data onto and be able to prove that data is there. So it's like a data availability layer. And yeah, so the interoperability is, I think, important just for the ecosystem in general. And so it is something we're thinking about, and spending quite a bit of time mapping out.
Do you have any future integrations that you're planning, or future partnerships? How's that building out in the future here?
Yeah. Where to start? We just had another call earlier today, and I can talk about some of these partner projects that we're working with. We've announced them, so obviously we can talk about them. So Masa is one. Masa's focused on creating a decentralized infrastructure for AI development, and particularly for having an AI, like a marketplace for AI training data. Another partner that we have is Public AI, which they share our vision of data ownership and fair compensation for stuff. And the whole idea is like decentralizing RLHF. And for listeners, that stands for reinforced learning with human feedback. The way to train models is a lot of times when you have an untrained model and you ask it for something, it's just going to spit out craziness. And so people don't realize when they've used GPT-3, 4, eventually 5, and any other models that are being trained, they all go through an RLHF process. And it's not as sophisticated as you might think. I mean, a lot of times it looks more like Amazon's Mechanical Turk, and the jobs are somewhat simple. This is a great example of how Web3 can be like perfectly paired with this. You can imagine how, where you have a reputation system that's built into Web3. You can attribute things easier. You can pay people easier. You want to be able to work with somebody like, oh, I know this person's going to really be able to annotate the data really well, or this company or this subgroup or this DAO is going to be really able to annotate the data really well. Who else do we have? We have ZK AGI. They're completely aligned with our focus on privacy preserving AI development, ZK proofs on chain, distributed storage, secure computation, all that. So, I mean, there's a lot of overlap, but the thing that we've really seen with the projects that are going to be building on the network as we launch is that we're all on the same page. Like, there aren't any projects that are like, we want to keep all the data and not do whatever. Like, everybody's on the same page. We want it to be distributed. We want this free and accessible internet. It's really like harkening back to the original ideas of the internet or Usenet, where people just wanted to enjoy the internet, wanted to contribute, and finally having a way to compensate people for things that they're doing in a way that's fair, equitable, on-chain, testable, etc., and having identification behind that is major. Yeah.
Yeah, that was just going to be a general question I had. I think your mainnet is it out already? If not, if there's going to be a token attached to it, because I see some on your X on Twitter, as we all know it. There's some farming opportunities, and I hate to ask this, but there are some monetary gains that can be had. I was just curious how that works in the community.
Yeah, Jeremy, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah. So we've been running an incentivized testnet for about the last year. That ended, I think about 8 weeks ago. That obviously was the ending was the culmination of the beginning of our mainnet launch. So we do expect mainnet launch to happen sometime in the next few weeks. Participating in the network and kind of earning the rewards is quite simple. If you have excess SSD space on your computer or your laptop, all you do is pledge that space to the network, and that becomes kind of the fuel for our consensus. And then you earn rewards as you get selected as you're mining via that storage. So the way the network works is it asks you, hey, prove that you're storing some data. Whoever can prove that will get the reward for the block. They'll write the block just like a miner on Bitcoin. So what this allows is for quite radical decentralization. So anybody can participate with pretty basic equipment. Most people have some excess storage on their computer. There's really no minimal CPU, or I mean, there's minimal, but modern CPUs will work. Any modern computer will work. So this will allow for, as I said, for anyone to participate in our incentivized testnet. We maxed out at about 150 petabytes of storage. So that's quite a bit for a testnet. We expect there'll be many multiples of that once we launch mainnet. We also had about 10,000 nodes at the peak, so we had about 10,000 people farming on the network. That could be there's really no limit from a fundamental standpoint. The network could handle as many farmers as we can get onto the network. So whether that's 10,000 or a million, so quite decentralized.
Yeah, I had a question about DePIN actually. We've heard that narrative come up alongside AI, of course. How is that going to play out? What issues may come up? Because that's kind of what Bitcoin was until the monoliths took over, right? It sort of was a DePIN. Can you tell us anything that we're not seeing? Because that's quite a new trend, I would say. That's come up recently, and it's affecting a lot of sectors. I know, communications on there. You guys talk about AI, and what else are we not aware of there?
Yeah. Maybe I can take a stab. Right now, okay, so like the beginning of the year, like let's take ETH Denver, for example. A lot of people were talking about DePIN. And for listeners, DePIN stands for Decentralized Physical Infrastructure Networks, right? So think about like there were projects back in the last bull run in 2022, like Helium Network. And Helium was all about like IoT mining and having your own wallet for that and having like a mesh net that people contribute to and being able to earn money because IoT devices or devices like scooters can pull from that network. DePIN can be so many different things. There's so many different other projects. Like Hive Mapper is a really cool project, just from my memory, which is essentially just a dash cam where the dash cam records video of like Street View, and then you're compensated with Hive token by contributing to the network and updating images. So pretty much DePIN has kind of become like anything that's physical that you can install or use, and you can earn money for that. Like Akash Network is another great example as being a decentralized GPU marketplace. So Akash, which is run by Greg Asari, which has existed for a long time now, really novel concept where you have all these H100 GPUs that people don't have access to, and they want access to it. Like if you want to train a model, like you need to have beefy GPUs. And like great example, like if you jump on GitHub and download a repo and run some of the code for some of these video diffusion softwares, even if you have a lot of RAM, even if like my new Mac has 128 gigs of RAM, but that's not a lot for some of these models. Like you need more RAM, you need more GPU power. And so like you're going to need like a major Windows or Linux rig to run something, and it's going to be pretty paltry at best. Like ideally, if people have these things and they're not using them, they can rent them out when they're not using them, and then you can use them if you're training a model, if you're doing something that's more intensive. And that's the whole reason why cloud exists anyway, but it's just allowing for compensation to be more fairly distributed. So we're going to see that across the board. Like Render Network is another good example. I'm just like Filecoin is technically describing itself as being DPIN, and then storage chains are now being called DPIN. But as time's going on, like the beginning of the year was more like DPIN, DPIN, DPIN. Now everything's DAI or decentralized AI, and like DAI is more of like an overlap of DPIN that also encompasses some of the more like raw elementary aspects of Web3. Yeah.
Nice. Can you share any upcoming features or developments that's on Autonomy's roadmap?
Yeah, Jeremy, you want to go ahead?
Sure. Yeah, so we're launching the consensus chain. So that is kind of the primary chain. We have a concept of layer twos that are kind of inherent in the network. That's where execution happens. So those will be launching. We call them domains. We'll be launching domains in the first quarter. That'll include an EVM, so everybody can load up their MetaMask and come do all their NFTs and such on the chain. Then we'll also have an identity. So I was talking about this earlier with, really for human and agent interaction and identification requires an identity. So we'll have a domain that's dedicated to identity. We'll have some domains dedicated to data. So as short-term data availability, our chain is long-term data availability. So they'll work together to kind of provide full data availability and very, very high upload throughput. In the shorter term, once we launch Consensus Chain, we are going to be launching an SDK and an interface to be using the chain as a permanent storage layer. So I think this will be key also to stick with the theme of the podcast for NFTs as well as other AI use cases. So we'll be onboarding partners using that to put permanent storage that's quick, fast retrieval with a data access layer above the chain.
Yeah, it's awesome stuff. And what you guys are building is extremely cool. Kind of my last question is, I guess, to both of you, just curious on where you think the path of AI, what it's going to look like in like 1 to 3 years from now, how that's going to integrate with your network. But just really curious how sophisticated this space is going to get and how fast it's going to be.
So I know Chris is going to have a much deeper answer on this because he's like the AI everything. But the 1 to 3 year, the 1 year, I think we're just going to continue to see steady improvements. I think agents are going to start becoming more of the talking points. I think right now everything has been much more LLM model focused, but OpenAI just released a tool I haven't gotten to play with yet, but it's Swarm that's kind of more for multi-agent systems. I'm looking forward to interacting with that. So agents will be a big theme over the next year. I think looking 3 years, it's really hard to underestimate the impact AI is going to have on every aspect of our lives. So it's kind of a cop-out answer. I'm sure Chris has got the very specific ones, but it's just it's a time and place in history that we are right now that everything is just going to transform. I think over the next few years from the age before and after kind of the introduction of real generative AI.
Yeah, I completely agree. Where to even begin with this question? I mean, there's so many people that have ideas about what the future is going to look like. I'm not an oracle. I've just been reading a lot of what the smartest people are saying. Another plug would be Leopold Aschenbrenner's situational awareness paper that came out over the summer, where he kind of shows the path towards AGI in the form of counting the ohms or orders of magnitude of progress. Based on that, it seems like we're on a trajectory to reach artificial general intelligence at the latest by late 2027, 2028. And what does that mean? That means that there'll be models that are running probably centralized, that are AGI, followed closely by open source models that are runnable on giant computers, followed closely by smaller models, increasingly so. As time is going to go on, these AI systems will become increasingly sophisticated. That requires, if we want to have the sort of content provenance, identity that we want for these things, we need networks that are next gen. We need things that have high throughput, high performance storage and compute. Things that a distributed storage network would be good for. Better consensus mechanisms, greener consensus mechanisms, things that more people can participate with, and lowering the barrier to entry. When people talk about DePIN, it's like, okay, like the people that were into it like years ago, it's like they have like rack mount computers in their house and they're contributing to all these different networks getting tokens. Not very many people do that. I mean, there's people that do it globally, and we are a distributed network. But for me, when I think about people in my life that aren't interested in Web3 and are only like moderately interested in AI is going to eat everything. It's going to envelop everything, and it's going to change how the internet's being used. A lot of questions about, you know, it already feels like a lot of content online is fake. That is going to continue to be the case. We want to have content being attributed to things and and that's what content provenance is all about. That's why C2PA was created. It was created so that people can track and understand the data that they're seeing online, the deep fakeification of everything, right? Like it gets to a point where there's literally GitHub repos I can download where I can take your face from this podcast and put it on my face in real time and talk. That calls into question lots of things. There are tools that integrate with the APIs for GPT and plenty of other things like Claude, where you can take that and you can answer questions in real time. So we're getting to a point where like it's like the unrealification or deep fakeification of things. We need systems that we can trust, and we know that blockchain systems can provide those things. As we look into the future for the next few years, we're going to see multi-layered agentic systems that will be complicated under the hood, but will be simple for users. I mean, think of the movie Her. Everybody's seen that movie. We're really close to that. I mean, everybody was, shocked about the advanced voice mode that came out recently for OpenAI. Even the preview model was crazy. And obviously Strawberry was like just blowing up over the summer in anticipation of that step-by-step learning. So we're just going to see increasing sophistication. There's lots of computer scientists and people in the space that do not believe that transformer architecture will have us reach AGI. There are people like David Shapiro who have quit AI for writing about AI because he believes we've already achieved AGI, essentially. And it just depends on how you think about it. I mean, if you were to compare AGI to being like base 100 IQ on a standard distribution, then we've already reached AGI because we already have models with long context windows, longer than some people, that are able to do novel things. The bar always moves. The Turing test used to be, can I prove to you that you think I'm a computer, you think I'm a person, but I'm actually a computer. Now it's like the bar for being AGI is like, can you perform novel research, right? So we've already passed the bar. It's just a matter of who you talk to. A lot of people think that AI is going to change exponentially. It's already changing exponentially. So I think the next few years are going to be crazy. I think businesses that aren't very aware of what's going on and aren't surrounding themselves with people who are following this, it is a daily thing. It is not a weekly thing. It's not a monthly thing. It's not a yearly thing. It is a daily thing that we need to follow because the space is crazy. Web3 is crazy too. And these two things colliding are like just two rocket ships colliding into each other. It's crazy. So I think 3 years from now, full AGI models that are running possibly on-chain inference will become the norm and not the exception with tools like Venice AI. Yeah, that's my take.
Yeah, I was gonna wrap, but I did have one question since you had a really good wrap up there. You had a great summary, you had a great wrap up and projection of the future. I guess the question is for the general person out there who's interested in Web3, like myself and Brian. We got in deep, with NFTs. We love provenance, we love ownership. How deep do we need to be in the world of blockchain AI 3.0? And what educational resources are you guys providing, or any initiatives that you guys are providing? Like you said, it could be a daily thing, and we know how it is getting into the daily weeds of Web3. It's pretty inundated information. I was just curious of your thoughts of how much deeper we need to get as just a lay person.
It's like Alice in Wonderland, as deep as the rabbit hole, as far as you want to go with this. I would say join our Discord. I'm a little biased because I'm on the team for Autonomys. We're talking about this stuff. Join Discords of groups that are working in public to achieve AGI. Follow companies on Twitter that are actively talking about and promoting these ideas. There's the whole notion between cyberpunk and solarpunk. Like, do we want a future that's dysregulated where it's like a dystopia, or do we want a future with moderate, sensible governance? Not just on-chain governance, but like real legislation that's happening in the real world now. Because as these technologies expand, the notion of what governance even is and how effective it is going to change. That harkens back to the whole notion of Balaji Srinivasan's network state, right? That this idea that statehood's going to change. And as they say, I think Buckminster Fuller was quoted as saying, like, if you want to change a system, build a better one. Don't try to supplant the original one. That's what Bitcoin's goal was during the financial crisis, right? Like, we don't like this system. Let's find a new way to build something. And that's how you make a revolution. You make a revolution by building new things that are so good, you can't deny it. So good, like the Cal Newport sort of mindset, like so good, you can't be ignored. Be so good, you can't be ignored. So that's what we need. We need networks that have high throughput and all that jazz. If you want to follow it, the rabbit hole goes as far as you want. Join interesting discords, talk to smart people, keep following the space, read some of these really influential books that have come out recently. Read Life 3.0, read things by Jeffrey Hinton, read things that are coming out of Oxford's University for the Cosmos Institute for new AI research. Look into what the smartest people are saying about AI risk, existential risk, AI safety. It just goes as far as you want to, and you can dive as much as you like. But regardless of how much you dive, it will impact your life soon. So it's up to y'all.
Well, we appreciate your welcome into your Discord. That was my last question to you guys. Where can we find you? How can people find you if you'd like to be found and to connect with you guys?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Autonomys. Was it autonomysnet.xyz or Jeremy? Sorry, why am I blanking on this?
Autonomous.xyz.
That's what I thought.
That's
okay.
autonomous
Sorry.
with a Y. With
Yeah.
a Y. So YS at the end of it.
Join our Discord. Follow us on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter. Follow Jeremy on Twitter.
Awesome. Well, we'll put all the links down below so that our community can find you guys. We'd love to have you guys back. Honestly, probably in a shorter time than I would like, because how fast the space moves, and hopefully we're not going to be all generative here. We'll be live people still.
I hope. Yeah, gosh. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome, guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.